Everyone, Thomas Brown has joined us, the offensive coordinator for the Panthers, and we'll go ahead and start things out with questions. Looks like the first hand up is David Newton. Again, guys, Coach Brown has met a lot of you, I guess, previously, but if you would just remind him who you are on your outlet when you ask your question. Thanks so much. Go ahead, David.
Okay. Hey, Thomas, David Newton here. Glad
How
to
you
have
doing,
you
man?
aboard. Good. So, what did you see in Bryce Young over the weekend that made you believe he could be the starter week one?
Well, I mean, I think everything you saw on tape from him at Alabama, I think just from the beginning of the process, from how he handles pressure to his operation to the QB mechanics, ball placement, then having a chance to be with him in person, sit in meetings, hear him call back plays, talk through concepts. So we just tried to do a really good job of trying to start those rookies off with some just base calls, introduction of our offense, not overloading anybody, including him, but thought he handled it well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's go to Joe and then Scott.
Hey, Thomas, Joe Person with The Athletic. Thanks
Joe,
for
what's going on?
joining us. Hope
No
you're
problem.
well.
Doing great.
Wanted to ask you about how the kind of melding of the offensive schemes has gone. I think Frank had told us at one point that you were really responsible for the installation.
Yeah, so it's been going great so far. I think we, as I mentioned during my opening press conference, tried to kind of sit down and look at both systems and strip them all the way down to the bare roots and try to figure out how to build them back up to make them better, but also how to put them together to find this perfect blend and perfect marriage. So in an ideal world, it'd probably be about 50-50, but there's no ideal world to kind of fit it into that box. But it's been going well. We'll kind of go into next week OTA-wise in our third time going through the same install. So a lot of kind of carryover for our players, but it's been good so far.
What would you say the percentage breakdown is of what you brought versus Frank's scheme?
I think it depends on situation. I would say normal D&D is probably 60-40. But I think it varies depending on personnel grouping as well. You talk about 11 personnel versus 12 or 13 because if you watch in LA, we were probably 97% 11 personnel, so there wasn't a lot of 12 or 13 inventory. So that does change up some. But like I said before, trying to keep it as much as we can an even split of 50-50, try to find the best of both worlds. But what's going to be most effective for our players and that's going to come moving forward is the most important part. Thanks for the question.
Hey, Thomas. Scott Fowler from the Charlotte Observer. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. How you doing, Scott?
Glad to see you.
Glad to see you, too.
Can you look ahead a little bit, not hypothetically, but just sort of in the sense of you've got a veteran quarterback who's played a ton and knows everything about the NFL and a hotshot rookie. How are you going to manage that relationship?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and hopefully I don't just come up here and give you the cliche coach answer, but it's going to be an honest answer. I'm trying to look. I haven't looked past the day yet because we just got off the field, and I haven't even had a chance to watch the tape yet. But I think having a veteran guy in the room is kind of the ideal scenario, regardless of what happens on the road, because of Andy's leadership qualities. They're doing a great job of communicating, not just with Bryce, but the entire room, based on his experiences about what went well, but also the other side of it also. But just trying to figure out how to make every room, every player, even every coach, the best they can be every day is always my thought process.
If you don't mind, I'd like to follow up on one thing.
Sure.
You mentioned before, as you know, that you were a shorter player who performed admirably for a long time. So, your thoughts on Bryce Young at 5'10"?
I never cared about it. It was never an issue, in my opinion, just for me. I evaluate tape. We're still playing football, so if we were in a competition for the tallest, the biggest, the fastest, the strongest, like it's an overall combine deal, then maybe so. I would have been probably in a different category as well, but no comparison to myself at all. I am I guess, considerably shorter person depending on who I'm standing next to, but I wouldn't even put my playing ability in the same conversation with Bryce as far as our ability at all. I do appreciate the compliment as far as us, smaller players, the so-called smaller players. But for me personally, I never cared about it because I evaluate tape. I evaluate the person. Think about this projection to this level. And, Bryce is himself. I'm not into comparisons about what came before, who's coming in the future, because I try to look at everybody individually of what they can do, what they can bring to the table. So for me personally, I never cared about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike K, please.
Yeah, hey Thomas, Mike Gay from the Charlotte Observer. Good to see you again.
Good seeing you too, Mike.
So I know we talked about size and how that not being a factor, but with you guys marrying the schemes and going a little bit more 12 and 13, how has your view on bigger wide receivers, mainly the X position, and maybe that other tight end position when you do run to 12 personnel, maybe changed with the way you guys have put this all together?
For me personally, I would say about the same. I think, in an ideal world, I have an X receiver who can win by himself, backside, one-on-one, dictate coverage. When it comes to third down, being able to have somebody who the QB can look to as far as, hey, I got a one-on-one matchup backside with individual cuts, that guy can come alive. And to kind of get to the question you asked about from a 12 personnel standpoint, I've always kind of viewed trying to have a Y, so 11 personnel or 12 personnel attached tight end, as a combo player, the guy that can be in line from a blocking surface standpoint, hold up in pass protection or play action protection, but also be effective in a short to intermediate pass game. I would say in an ideal world, you want to have that second tight end or sometimes a third tight end be a little bit more athletic, who may not be as big or as physical. If he has all those tools, that's always a bonus. But look at what we call our F tight end, the off-the-ball tight end, kind of being more of a move player, a possible matchup issue that can kind of dictate when it comes to who can win versus man coverage as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
If I could follow up on that,
Yep.
You have some tight ends who could be out there in 21 if you wanted to. What's your guys' outlook on maybe a more crowded backfield?
Say the last part one more time. I missed the last part of it.
What's your mindset on kind of a more crowded backfield, 12 personnel,
Okay.
20 personnel sort of thing?
To me, I think it depends on what fits for our players first, what gives an opportunity to be able to maximize their skill sets. But it's also about how can we marry formations to make it hard as possible to defend. There's always going to be a kind of a gameplay element when it comes to if it gives you an advantage, if it kind of dictates coverage, just give you single how it looks for, the run action, but also some keeper action as well. But to me, we kind of play around with that from day one as far as what fits our players best, but also what gives them an opportunity to take advantage of the defense. Thanks, Mike.
Let's go to Darren and then Deshaun.
Thomas, you mentioned your playing days. When you guys are out there on the practice field, does that change the dynamic between coaches and players when you have so many guys on this staff who did play in the league?
I think it gives a perspective of what those guys have been through before. You definitely don't have to be, some elite or even college player to be able to be a coach, but I think it does give a different perspective when it comes to relating to guys that you've been through their positions before. You can obviously hear Deuce talk a lot about his playing background, what his experience, having a guy like Josh in the quarterback room that has, 18 years of experience to talk about from different offenses, different philosophies, things that kind of helped him, but also I think the benefit sometimes of being a player first and becoming a coach is I want to improve my ability as a coach to be able to affect my players more based on, whether you had great coaches before in the past or just okay coaches. It's how can I improve it to make the players the best they can be. So there's definitely a benefit in my mind.
Coach Brown, good to see you. Deshaun Brown with Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
Good to see you as well.
I wanted to ask, now that you've had a chance to sit with the staff and also the players at this point, when you're breaking down the identity of this offense, what do you tell them?
Yeah, kind of same thing I said from day one in our opening press conference. As I said to the rookie this past weekend, I think it kind of fits down into, first off, is being physical at every position. That, to me, for us offensively, is kind of a non-negotiable. It's kind of one of the great neutralizers when it comes to this game. I think being able to establish line of scrimmage, which our O-line and Coach Campy and Coug did a great job on last year, trying to just build upon that. But then to me, it goes from just the physical element to how do we find, create and win matchups. That could be with, pre-snap motions. That could be regular motions, fly sweep motions. It could be getting man zone indicators to try to figure out how to exploit the defense from a matchup standpoint. But also could be in-line wise. That we have a matchup with a guard or three technique. Might be kind of setting some front certain ways to be able to get some combination work with those guys week in and week out. And the last point, after we talk about being physical, we talk about finding, creating, winning matchups. It was, for us, we call it TNT. All right, so things that take no talent. So alignment, assignment, technique, right, effort, and finish. Things we can control every single day to put ourselves in the best spot to be successful and ultimately not putting ourselves in the spot we give the defense an opportunity by beating ourselves. So the penalties, the bad technique, the missed assignments, we want to just major in those things. So, being physical at every position, like find, create, and win matchups, and then major in the TNT is what we talked about offensively.
All right, let's go to David, then
Yeah, I wanted to ask you another Bryce question. He didn't work a lot under center at Alabama. How much are you guys trying to get him acclimated to that? How has he looked so far from the little you've seen of that, and how important is that to what you want to accomplish?
I think what kind of fits us offensively and fits us from a quarterback standpoint is always going to be the most important thing. As you mentioned, not just him, but almost if you look at every college quarterback, most of them are going to be in the gun. I don't care what they play or their ability levels. But I think being able to start day one with how to teach the mechanics of our center quarterback exchange we work on every single day for about 10 minutes. Going through that is going to be, a great deal for us, day in and day out, which he's been really good with so far. I think maybe Coach Caldwell kind of mentioned to me about our rookie mini camp, kind of the first time he's been around where there were, kind of no balls on the ground, which is a huge deal for him and also our centers working together as far as eliminating those things that might end up, putting you in a tough spot. So I think just trying to find what fits us best offensively is kind of a work in progress, and it's always about catering your system to what fits your players the best.
And how spread out do you hope to run your offense? And when you do that, that's going to put a lot of pressure, it looks like, on the quarterback, right? And you feel like that's something that fits with Bryce a lot?
So you try to get all the answers on this off-season wise. There's too much information. I would say it'd be a mix of both, depending on down and distance. To answer your question about spreading out more, being more, putting more pressure on the quarterback, and sometimes alleviate stress off the quarterback when it comes to known pass downs because you can see it better. I think sometimes you're more condensed and bunch splits, tight splits. We will have some of those mixed into our offense. It makes it harder and easier for defense to kind of disguise coverages versus being spread out. Got to get lined up from a coverage responsibility standpoint. But I think being able to have a mix of both, there'll be a rhyme or reason for us being in close splits versus being aired out, but I'll try to have a good mix of it.
Well, since I'm trying to get all the answers, will Bryce be your starter week one?
There you go. I'm never going to answer that question. I think being able to just go, from day-to-day standpoint, obviously Andy's our starter right now. Bryce is getting a lot of reps with the ones and twos just because he is a rookie. Like most of our rookies are kind of getting some more work over some of the veterans because of just the experience and the repetition of it. But, what's today? Tuesday? It's, Tuesday, so I'm looking forward to Wednesday, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thomas, on Bryce, was there a moment in the pre-draft process that kind of sold you on him, for lack of a better term? And we've heard Frank talk about how Scott gave him a couple weeks to kind of get on board and sort of come to a consensus, I guess, on the quarterback. What was your process like as it pertained to those quarterbacks pre-draft?
Yeah, so really good question. I would say starting first with my interview when I came in and kind of met the end of it with Scott and Dan and Samir. We had the specific question about, one, have I evaluated the quarterbacks, which I had, and kind of how I saw them, which I won't go through my, rankings at the time then. But I felt really good about Bryce at that process, at that time, just based on this film study. But having a chance to be on the road, see all the quarterbacks almost kind of back-to-back in different settings, whether it be, at a dinner, to kind of get a feel for their personalities, what they knew from a knowledge standpoint. I would say what kind of put him over the hump in my mind was spending time with him just talking about this ball, how his brain works, how he communicates, what he can recall, how he can adjust on the fly. And also he always just stayed, here the entire time. Just loved the poise. Never got rattled for the most part, even though Frank tried to shake him up a couple of times to try to see how he responded to it. But he was cool, calm, and collective. Then being able to have a chance to, just hear about his family, see him with his mom and dad, you kind of get a really good feel of why he's become who he is just based on how they've raised him, which is a huge compliment to them, was kind of what sold me. On top of just the tape of the tape, he was really good from that standpoint, but being able to just hear him communicate, hear his process, even ask him a simple question about, I asked him during the dinner, take me through how you finished Saturday night, you guys play big-time game. Take me through, Sunday to the next game. And for most guys, that's probably a 5-minute conversation. So we're 17 minutes into it, and it was Wednesday. And I said, hey, stop, dog. I'm good. Like, I appreciate the detail, but he was going through everything from when he wakes up, goes in the meeting rooms, what he actually studies by day, his preparation process. So those details to me kind of just put him over the board in my mind.
Guys, we got to let Coach go, so let's do two individual quick ones from Mike Hay and then Scott.
So Bryce has kind of been known for the off-schedule throw. We saw that a little bit in mini camp.
Yeah.
How, as a coach, do you kind of balance that with, hey, there are certain rules that we have within the offense?
Yeah, so really good question. I would say, first off, it all starts with the DTA. So quarterback's decision-making, right, timing and accuracy is what the DTA we talk about stands for. But I think you don't want to take away guys' superpowers. I think being able to have off-schedule plays is a big part of his game, but also most elite quarterbacks nowadays. Be able to, escape the pocket. Got to be really good as far as our operation out of the pocket with our receivers from a scramble rule standpoint and repping it in practice. But I think as long as you have a good rhyme or reason for why you're doing it, not just making stuff up, that's always an issue, which he doesn't do at all. But also being able to ultimately having taken care of the football at the number one priority. So making good decisions, great ball placement. And there's gonna come a time when you might have some leakage, the pocket may break down. But I would say overall, it's just as long as you're operating within the rhythm and the timing of the play, it'll be all good from our standpoint.
I'll be real quick, Coach. And maybe you address this. I apologize if so. I was out of town on your first press conference.
Y'all good.
But is Frank Wright definitely calling all the offensive plays this year? And also, will you be working from the sideline or from the booth?
Yes, and from the sideline.
All right.
That's a quick answer.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Quick question, quick answer. So I'll try to match what you gave me.
All right, Coach. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Media-wise, just y'all hang on the line.